Goodbye, Morphin Jar number 2. It is now limited to one. It's doggone shame because this is actually one of my favorite cards. I used to love to tech this card almost every deck I had just to tick people off. I mean, nothing like trolling somebody after they did all that hard work and you just put Morphin Jar 2 down and all their hard work goes, to the pot. Sometimes it backfire, but man, Morphin Jar 2 limited. Goodbye, empty jar decks. As I was looking at, the ban list, and quite frankly, the ban list is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Almost nothing. Besides, Mermails got hit, and then Morphin Jar got, limited to one, which I really don't know why. Konami just decided to do it. I decided to do a little search on jar and pot, jars and pots, and I'm just looking at these cards, and it's interesting. It seems like they have a lot of story to them, and everything else. You have, first of all, a vanilla card, ancient jar, and most of the jar monsters, many of the jar monsters only have one eye or so, but it changed. Konami has made a lot of cards with jars and you just saw pot of greed, jars and pots. So a lot of them, some are rock monsters. You got ancient jar, which the lore says a very fragile jar that contains something ancient dangerous. 400 and 200. You got morphin jar, which was limited a long time ago, and it needed to be. I'm surprised it hasn't been banned yet, but especially it's dangerous, especially like in decks like Dark Worlds. You have Morphin Jar number 2. You have Dice Jar. You have Cyber Jar. You have Absorb Jar or Absorbing Jar. Um, you have Fiber Jar, which was uh, banned, I believe. You have Dimensional Jar. You have, believe it or not, Cobra Jar, which is a reptile. Now, I'm gonna put this down here. I'll talk about this one later. And then you have the pots. Excuse me. You have the pots. You have Pot of Greed, which was banned. It was one of my favorite cards. Draw 2 cards. Why that card ain't back yet at 1, I don't know. With all that draw power people have. You have Pot of Avarice. You have Pot of Duality. You have Pot of Benevolence. Pot of Generosity. Pot of Duplicity just came out. Uh, and then these cards had, monsters. Pot of Greed had monsters that are cards that went with it. The avatar of the pot. By sending one Pot of Greed from your hand to the graveyard, draw 3 cards from your deck. Uh, you have the Spirit of the Pot of Greed. While this card is in face-up position on the field, if a player activates Pot of Greed, then draw one more card. And then the card that just came out, that was really crazy. Uh, and this goes with some of the monsters. Well, actually, let me get to the other pots. You got Jar Greed. You have Dragon Capture Jar. So let me say, yeah. You have Jackpot 7 just came out. And Goblin of the Greed. Okay, here we go. A lot of these cards, especially the Pot of Greed cards or the Goblin cards, have some kind of lore that goes with them, from Goblin of Greed, Goblin Thief, uh, Goblin Secret Remedy, Peking Goblin, Upstart Goblin, and a lot of these cards you'll see, for instance, at the bottom, Exhibitional Goblin, um, Good Housekeeping Goblin. So you'll see Goblin out of the frying pan, and I remember somebody did a lore on a Pot of Greed, and it was actually pretty good. I have to check that out and put them together myself. Uh, and it had something to do with this tyrant, I believe. The tyrants and the royal cards. You got Jar Turtle, so each time a Jar of Greed is activated, draw 1 card. So that's really, I think, Pot of Greed. So and all these have, that a lot of these have their funny monster, in the background. Somehow, I don't know how it was. Somehow the Goblin somehow something was unearthed and it became the pot of greed. I don't know how that works. Because even to come, some of the smile is somewhat the same. Except it just one big eye compared to big eyes, whatever, a big eye. Um, so I mean, this is just my brief homage to the different pot cards and jar cards that's in there. And they have a story. And some of the stories come from the Goblin cards. I actually made a Goblin deck one time, and I played it on Dev Pro, and I got a lot of props. Even though I got whooped. I was playing a lot of props. I ought to make another one just because Goblin and Orc deck. Uh, it was just for fun, but I lost the deck. It was nothing anyway. It wasn't gonna win. No, only thing to win you is man, that's interesting. So anyway, Morphin Jar 1, Morphin Jar 2, number 2 at 1. Bye bye, uh, bye bye empty jar decks. And I had a good one at one time. Had to do something with all out attack and something else. And that deck, sometimes you just sit there and once you get it going, once Morphin Jar 2 came out, you just kept on milling out cards like crazy. So from you and your opponent, you just hope your deck didn't mill out before that one did. You just both opponents just sit there and watch. Both players sit there and watch and everything. So once again, just going through the jars: Ancient Jar, Morphin Jar 2, Dice Jar. I try to make a Dice Jar deck. Cyber Jar, banned. Zorban Jar, Fiber Jar, banned. Dimension Jar, which I see both players can remove from. I never really seen anybody use this card. And so, the jars and pots, y'all. Mad Scientist X7, I'm out. That's my video for today.